at all. Just a message to the coaches that are joining us. There will be opportunity to ask some questions later on. So using the chat function, introduce yourself. We always like to know what the weather's like, and we hear it's raining in the UK. It's raining here in Sydney. So if you are anywhere where there's a sunshine, good chance to gloat about that. So introduce yourself. If you can, in 3 words, describe the culture environment for your club and team. We're going to be talking about that today with Tanya and Dan. And add any questions in there as well. That, like I said, there'll be a chance to ask questions later, but get those in the chat function as soon as possible, and feel free to answer them as well. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Okay, well we'll make a start. And hello and welcome back to the Australian College of Physical Education, and welcome back to the Monday Night Coaches Club. My name is Gareth Long, and I'm really pleased that we're still able to connect coaches with this informal coach education webinar series, and continue the opportunity to learn from quality coaches on the panel, and of course quality coaches from the audience. So thank you very much for joining us. As always, I have excellent coach educators helping me with tonight's webinar. Fresh from his appearance on the panel in episode 13, but back as chief summariser today, I have Drew Taylor. Good to see you again, Drew.
Gareth, thanks for having me as always.
No, great to see you again, mate. And on co-hosting duties for the second time, and he'll be monitoring your questions in the chat room. From the southwest of England is John Dorr. Thanks for getting up early and joining us today, John.
Pleasure, Gareth. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. It's a fascinating topic today. We're looking at the development of successful cultures and environments in our clubs and teams. And although both our panellists are probably largely concerned with the leadership of culture and environments in high performance contexts, I'm confident that the process and principles of developing these cultures and environments will resonate with coaches regardless of what our coaching contexts are. So on the 14th episode webinar, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce our panel. So firstly, I'm going to introduce Tanya Oxtoby. Tanya is the first team manager, head coach of Bristol City Women FC. Tanya has not only a UEFA A licence, but also a master's degree in sport and exercise psychology. Prior to her existing role at Bristol City, Tanya has been recruitment manager for the England Colleges Football Association, assistant coach at Birmingham City Ladies FC, and director of development at Notts County FC. And this week I watched a video of Tanya on Optus Sport, where Tanya said that sometimes in her coaching she can get a little bit angry and a little bit sweary, and blamed that on being an Aussie. So I'm really looking forward to speaking with Tanya today. Tanya, thank you for joining us.
Oh gosh, can't believe you watched that. Thanks for having me.
Well, I thought we'd prime it up in case you claimed your culture is always calm and
yeah,
perfect.
It's definitely not. It's definitely not.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for joining us, Tanya. Really appreciate that. And going anonymously today and incognito without a video is Dan Micciche. Dan is the phase lead for Arsenal's under-15-16s. Previous roles for Dan have included first team manager at MK Dons, national technical lead for the under-12-16s, and national head coach for the under-15-16s for England, and also head of coaching at MK Dons Academy. Dan is responsible for one of my favourite coaching quotes of all time, which is, "Too often coaches give players answers to remember rather than problems to solve. Our sessions are therefore characterised by randomness, variety, challenge, decision, choices, and problem solving." Dan, thanks for joining us. It's great that we'll get to hear you today. How are you going?
Hi everybody, apologies about my camera, yeah, really looking forward to it. Thank you very much for the invite.
No, thank you both. Thank you both for joining us. We really appreciate your time. And we know your time is precious, so we'll get cracking. So, Tanya, first question to you is, can you describe the culture at your current club? And the second part of the question is, what elements, principles of your club's culture environment do you think are still applicable to other aspects of football, perhaps grassroots coaching, for example?
Yeah, I think for us at our club, whenever I talk about culture as a set of behaviours. So whether that be for the players, for the staff, I think it's really, really important that whatever values that you put on certain behaviours, they need to be measurable, and they need to be attainable, and they need to be consistent. So when we talk about the culture in our club, it's interesting because we did it yesterday actually. The players are a massive part of that. You know, the behaviours that we're talking about are, as coaches, we've obviously got an ideal of what we would like, and that's generally, in my experience, based on kind of our own morals and our values and things like that. But it's important that the players have input in that, in my opinion, because they're the ones that have to live and breathe those behaviours, and they're the ones that have to be able to, you know, maintain those behaviours and make sure that the culture is a positive one. So for us, you know, we popped the girls in small groups yesterday, and they came up with a list of things that were, you know, and players will come up with quite general stuff, which is fine. And then it's really delving into, you know, for example, one of the behaviours, I guess, that came up yesterday for us was to make sure that you recover. And I then had to sort of prompt that a little bit and say, what does that look like? What are we talking? What is recovery? Is it, you know, what are the behaviours, specific behaviours we want to be doing to make sure that we have recovered well, because that's measurable. You know, someone's version of recovery might be to go to the pub and have a pint, and someone else's, you know, version might be to foam roll, make sure they've got nutrition, you know, all of that sort of stuff. So trying to really label the behaviours and use them as a really measurable tool that we can hold ourselves accountable to. And, you know, if you've got it right, generally the players, you know, tick most of the boxes, and you just need to kind of really make sure that it's measurable. So like I said, we did ours yesterday. So our kind of culture is called a culture of excellence. It's just, you know, every coach will have their own way they describe it, but we have a culture of excellence that sits under a standard of performance, and the standard of performance is kind of what we have for the entire club. So whereas the culture of excellence is specific to the playing group and the staff.
Thank you, Tanya. Yeah, the more I read, the more I see about the importance of player input, and I see that particularly in high performance context. And I guess one of the things that could resonate with grassroots coaching is whether we do that as much in grassroots coaching as happens in performance cultures. Thank you. Okay, Dan, question for you. What's the process for creating or changing a club's culture? And I suppose, what's the balance between doing that as quickly as you want, or as quickly as you think you need, or perhaps taking a more measured, slower approach?
I think, yes, just reiterating what Tanya said there in terms of, the outcome of, for me, culture is the outcome of your work, and it's the behaviours. It's not something that you put on the wall. It's created by what you do. So rather than preaching something, you know, we do things, and a big part of that, I think, is role modelling, whether it's to staff or to players. So in my role, for example, as a phase lead, you know, it's important that, you know, I lead by example. I find a way of involving staff and players so they're invested in where we're trying to go. They're not just involved in it. So being involved could be that I always give them the answers, and I dictate to them what we want to do, and it might get us to where we want to get to slightly quicker. But I think the negative impact of that will be that they'll just do it because they're being told to do it rather than being passionate about it. So I'm a big believer in legacy, and big thing with the staff is, yes, we all work at Arsenal and it's fantastic, looks lovely on our CVs, and we'll develop players for the first team and for the professional game just by doing a good job. But what do you want to be remembered for, and what do you want to leave behind, and what do you want to take with you as well for yourself that you can look back on with pride? So I think a big part of it is, in terms of the process, is we have what we call a goal tree, which we used when I was at the FA, which I strongly believed in. which was just basically a strategy with your vision, your outcome goals, your performance goals, your process goals. But we do that process with the players and with the staff. So anything we ask the players to do, we do ourselves. So that's probably our starting point, that, you know, you start with your vision. So as staff, we've got the vision that our academy manager has given us, which is to be the most challenging and caring football academy in the world. And then my question to the staff is, how are we going to do this? And then obviously, more importantly, how are we going to be able to measure it? How we know we're doing it well? Because again, we can have a nice vision that goes on the wall, but you know, how are you doing this thing? So, you know, we put that in place as staff. We have things in place like we blame the players last. And that doesn't mean we don't ever blame the players, and blame is probably too strong a word, because you obviously, the ideal scenario is you have a blameless culture. But the point is that, you know, we look in the mirror first as staff, we look at ourselves first and the players last. And if we do that as staff, then we're not ever blaming external factors, and we're not sort of taking the easy way out of things. And I'm not a fan of, I got into coaching because I wanted to help young players try and prove that they're as good as anybody in the world. And I think one of the ways to do that is by always looking at yourself. How can you improve? What could you do? You know, Tanya mentions excellence. You know, if you're going to have something like that, which I think's extremely inspiring, to have such a set the bar so high, then, you know, make sure that you're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. So we do that with the staff. Blame the players last. Being efficient, so avoiding duplication. It's very easy with a lot of members of staff these days that you end up duplicating work and doing work which is probably unnecessary as well. You know, so we have a bit of a less is more approach, and making sure that our work is, you know, there's simplicity to it. You know, it's executable, it's repeatable, it's as efficient as it can be, and you know, nailing the basics. I think, you know, we can all get carried away with the bits which we all want to do, but let's not neglect the basics, which actually they're the foundation of our work. So we review those on a monthly basis. Traffic light system, red, amber, green. And it's about, I think, having a, like Tanya says, accountability and honesty in the room. And, you know, constructive conflict is healthy, I think. You know, we've got a saying that we use around, you know, I got this from Dan Ashworth again when I was at the FA, around, you know, the art of negotiation is nobody leaves happy, but everybody leaves satisfied. So, you know, when you've got something like that, you can create more of a unity. So it's not the Dan Micciche way. I don't always get my own way, but as long as we're striving to our vision, then that's all that matters for me. And then, like I say, we'll repeat that with the players. In terms of the fast impact that you mentioned, an example of that was, you know, I've sent somebody home before from a pre-season training camp abroad, when I think sometimes there's just non-negotiables that you've just got to react quickly, but react with a clear mind and no emotion attached to it. But what's the benefit of the individual first for themselves? What's the benefit for the whole group? Things like the changing rooms, you know, when they leave to go home, I'll make sure I'm the last one to leave, and I might go in the change rooms and take a photo of the changing room if it's been left really well and put it on the WhatsApp group. But alternatively, if it's not been, you know, perfect, I'll also just put a little photo on there and just say, is this us? And you just reinforcing messages, you know, and again, you're role modeling, because I think otherwise, you know, sloppiness comes into play and standards drop. But it's done with a bit of humour as well. It's not always serious, but the messages are there and they're consistent.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Look, I think that was a really good insight in how culture sort of comes off words off of pages and becomes more than that. So no, thank you very much for that. Tanya, so in an ideal world, obviously every culture and every environment is positive, but maybe that's not always reality. So in your view, what are some of the things that can contribute to a toxic culture and ineffective environments within clubs?
Yeah, I think we've all been involved, whether it was playing or coaching at some point. We might not have been leading it, but we've all been involved in environments maybe that weren't, you know, as positive and smooth as what we'd like. So for me, it's about reflecting on those and thinking what were the contributing factors. And like Dan said, you know, however you want to label your culture, however you want to kind of bring it to life, it has to be measurable and it has to be lived and breathed. And some of the kind of factors, you know, in my experience that have caused for that sort of be disrupted, if you like, and for it to turn a little bit more negative or toxic, is that you haven't really nailed down what those behaviours are. So they're not necessarily measurable. So again, they're words on paper. They're not, you know, they're not something that you can measure against and say, well, we did that and we didn't do that. It's more like, well, it's more of a general, you know, it's not a measurable behaviour as such. So that's one factor. I think when you've got your behaviours down, that you know, and it's you've got an agreed set of behaviours and everybody's bought into it, but there's no accountability for if those behaviours aren't, you know, adhered to or followed. That's also another factor that can affect, you know, your culture and the way people feel within that environment. Lack of accountability is another one. So, you know, or not role modelling behaviours. I think it's so important. Dan mentioned it before, that as staff, we need to live and breathe it. And if we're not doing it, then we can't expect the players to do it. It's not one rule for one and one rule for another. You know, from our experience, you know, we'll carry the equipment, you know, we'll put the equipment away. But that means then the players want to help with the equipment, and, you know, or they'll walk over and say, oh, let me take that. Or, you know, whereas if you're kind of that person that's sort of hands off and sort of, oh, that's not my job, then you can't expect the players to want to do that. If you cut corners as a staff member, or you're late, or things like that, you can't have you know, you can't then hold the players accountable when they're late. So you need to make sure that whatever it is, again, that you've labelled as part of your culture with your behaviours, that they're measurable and that you are role modelling those every single day. And if you have players or staff that are not doing that, you need to hold them accountable. And the kind of ideal for me is that we get to the point where that's not me that holds them accountable, it's the group. And that's the dream. You know, that if a player is not doing the right thing, other players will actually have a word and say, that's not what we do here, we do this. And it's resolved without needing for any sort of intervention from above, which would be, you know, that's kind of when you know you've nailed it, when it's sort of self-sufficient. And I think that the last one, that, you know, the last factor is results. I mean, we'll, you know, especially at the top end, results can affect culture, because everyone loves to win. It's really, the challenge is to make sure that you have a really a positive culture when you're not winning. And if you can do that, and that comes from the consistency of your behaviours and making sure that everyone's accountable, whether you're winning or losing. You know, you don't drop your standards, and that's where we talk about that standard of performance comes in, which oversees the entire culture, if you like. Those standards can't drop, no matter what, you know, whether you're winning or losing. And you know, if you allow that to happen and you kind of go, oh, well, you know, we lost yesterday, so it's all right if they come in a little bit late tomorrow. No, it's not. You know, that is our standard that we've set. You know, whether we win or lose, we make sure we maintain our standards in those behaviours. So they're some of the factors I think contribute. And I think it's about trying to, like I say, get to the dream of it being really self-sufficient and having the entire group hold everyone accountable. And that's when, you know, you can sort of just wipe your hands and sit back and enjoy.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you, Tanya. Look, I'll come to Dan again in a minute, but just a reminder that get your questions that I know you're listening and being really attentive, but, you know, get some questions in the chat room as well. and then we can definitely make sure that we're covering all bases of what people want to ask Tanya and Dan. So use that chat function. Dan, I think you've definitely started along this road in saying that culture is the behaviours and what we do. And you definitely talked about some of the behaviours from your players, but I wonder if you can elaborate and sort of explain to us what behaviours you expect to see from your players and staff that show you that they're reflecting the club's culture.
Well, I think each staff member deserves a voice and deserves an opportunity to input. So I think from my perspective, it's being an inclusive, and if that's what that's the way that I'm working, then you want the other members of staff to also sort of buy into that. So nobody's got a bad idea, and nobody's just because you're not going to take every idea on board doesn't mean people don't have the voice, and it's trying to sort of hear the quietest voice at times as well. And I think it goes the same with players. We create leadership groups, which we think are really important, and we create group expectations with that. So I think it's important not just to, again, you can put leadership groups in place, but is it just something that you say you do, or does it become a bit loose? Does it get a bit loose and it doesn't really impact anything? Why are you creating a leadership group? For me, the first thing is, to help their leadership skills. Last year I gave the captaincy to somebody who probably would have been the last person that anybody expected to have it, but I did it because I think he gave him an opportunity to develop his communication skills and give him some more responsibility, and it was a great satisfaction to see that person grow. So I think with leadership groups, you create the expectations. So things like what their responsibilities are. So we put a staff mentor with each one. So let's say you've got four leaders across a 2-month block. So across the season, if you've got 18 to 20 players, they all get a chance to do it. So everybody gets an opportunity. Each leadership group member has a staff mentor who they can check in with whenever they want, and we encourage that to be done regularly. And then every 2 weeks, that leadership group check in with the head coach. So the head coach isn't one of the mentors, but every 2 weeks that they have a check-in with the head coach about things they're noticing. And the idea around it is that the sort of culture ends up policing itself. It's not something which it requires the head coach or the staff members to constantly be on top of. And it's like anything when you're bringing your children up, you set the boundaries, and then obviously you give people responsibility, you explain the why, and it's a two-way thing as well. So for example, we have one of our rules is around punctuality, and about we have a saying that if you're 1 second late, you've missed the train. That would the same thing would happen if you went to go and get a train this morning. The train's gone. So that's just a little thing, you've missed the train. If you're going to get a train today, when would you get there? You'd get there at least 5 minutes before. Well, this is no different. But the same applies to me, so if I've been late to speak to the players in the change room, they've locked me out, and again, it's, I think we are allowed to have a bit of fun with all this as well. It doesn't have to all be serious. And we've got to be able to sort of show some vulnerability ourselves as staff and some honesty and say, yes, I was 1 minute late, 2 minutes late. And the thing with lateness is, as long as you communicate why you're going to be late, then it's okay. So the mistake I made there was not getting a message to the players 5 minutes before to say, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. I'm going to be there at this time. So I think the key with it is it works both ways. And there's like Tanya said, you role model the expectations that you expect of people off the back of your values. So if your values are excellence, like Tanya said, then everybody agrees to that, then you've got something which then you break it down, don't you? What is excellence on the pitch? What is it off the pitch? So one of ours is the under-16s one last year was to be a class Arsenal team on and off the pitch. And then their outcome goals were things like to win every game with our unplayable style of football. They had to be London Colney ready or scholarship ready. So that's one for them as an individual. And then the other one reflected more about them in life, schooled, etc. And then you have your performance goals underneath that. And so we had one so the unplayable one for me is a big one, in terms of how I want to play on the pitch and how Arsenal expect to play, and obviously with the first team manager we have now. So then then that's where you get your analyst involved. What are the key measures that we've got that will tell us that we're unplayable? And it might be, about chance quality, for example. So again, how do we involve the players in that? We have on a match day, we have an iPad on the bench, and if you're not starting, you'll have the iPad and you'll jot on in a penalty area where we've had our shots from, and we aim to have 80% of our shots inside what we call the triangle, which is just outside the 6-yard box. So we think they'll become good chances, and it means we got to play through the pitch and we've got to play with imagination. So that person might inform us at half time, look, we've had 8 shots, but only one have been inside the triangle. And then we can break that down. Okay, why has that been then? What is it we're not doing? No, we're not being patient enough. We're not playing enough 1-2s in and around the box, for example. And then because Arsenal has its own statistics company, if you like, Stat DNA, we can then compare what the players come up with the club's actual metrics. And then again, rather than that just drifting away, and the players thinking, gosh, I put those, I tracked that at half time and post game, and where's it gone? The following week, we'll always update them on where we are with our metrics. And then you can, when you review their goals at the end of the month and you say, okay, where are we at in terms of being unplayable? They can say, well, we think we're doing really well, because initially we were aiming for, at the moment we're on 400 passes per game. What we're going to do this month, we're going to aim for our average to be 450, for example. So you can always raise the bar, but you're always following through those metrics. And then what we did last year, which worked really well, was we did a mid-season review with them, which we filmed, and it was a bit X Factor like, in terms of like a panel. And one of the players was actually on the panel because he had only recently signed, and he English wasn't his first language, and so he came on the panel. And again, that was a way of bringing him in, as we asked him what his views were and helped us to tell us the questions for the players. But it was all filmed and question answer, but they got given a performance goal each, which was split across Arsenal's 4 pillars, which is similar to like the FA 4 corner model. So we just try and align everything together and make sure everything remains consistent, and you kind of create that reference point for the players, rather than each week you're coming out with different words and different sayings and different everything. And then we did the same at the end of season, so you repeat the process at the end of the season again, and they've got to bring evidence, whether it's video clips, stats, so they link in with the analyst department, they link in with the various departments to be able to evidence that they've achieved the goals that they set out to. And then, like I said, the same happens with the staff as a group, as well as individually. I gave the staff the option at the end of the season to do 360 appraisals, and again, hopefully role modelling good practice. I did it, you know, and I had probably 25 members of staff and 20 odd players who I got the feedback from. And you know, for me, that's invaluable really, because you find out what you're doing well, but you also find out what you can do, what you can improve to get the best out of people. And unless you ask them those questions, then you think you're forever just assuming, and some interesting things comes back. Yeah, like I said, in terms of behaviours, I think it's on and off the pitch. It's a never-ending list, really. But it's also appreciating that everybody's different. You know, not everybody's going to have the loudest voice. Not everybody's going to be at the same stage. Like I gave the example of the boy who I gave the captaincy to. It's not judging him and thinking, oh, he's a poor leader. It's how can I help him, you know, develop certain skills. And you can only really do that if before all this you get to know them as people. So one of the things we've been doing in the last few weeks with the new under 16 group, even though, you know, I've worked with them and things like that, is doing it's like a questionnaire, I suppose, but you're doing it over online with them. You're just asking them about what their motivations are, why do they play the game, who their influences are, what are their other interests and hobbies, and what are their goals. Because I think unless you know those things, you can't really connect with them. You don't know where they want to go. You assume they want to be footballers, and of course they all do. But why do they want to be a footballer? Who's their role model? You know, what got them started in this in the first place? What's been their highlights of their careers? What's been their setbacks? How do they deal with that? What do they need from us? You know, all those kinds of things, really. And I think once you've got that connection, then and they can see that you're all for them, you know, so you're consistent throughout the whole week, you know, you don't change as a leader, then I think you're on the right track.
Thanks, Dan. Look, I love the idea of one of your proudest moments being locked out of the changing room by your players for being late. I love that. And look, it's clear that the alignment between the behaviours and the culture, but you've given really good examples of how those behaviours are from your staff and your players, and that they don't seem to be different behaviours. They seem to be coherent behaviours. So thank you. Tanya, definitely in a conversation like this, we're going to have the word communication, and I think both you and Dan have already spoken about it. But how is effective communication fostered to contribute to the successful culture and environment?
Again, I think it comes back to knowing, you know, what is effective communication and making sure that you role model that as staff. I think Dan alluded to being vulnerable as staff, and I think that's massive. We're not perfect. We're not going to get it right all the time. You know, when you talk about effective communication, it's got to be honest. You know, it's got to be, you know, you've got to be able to receive information and give information, and that's not just the players, that's staff as well. You know, we've got a bit of a saying about, you know, you don't have to like everybody, but you have to respect everybody. Everyone is going to have different moral values, and everybody's going to have things that make them tick. And in a group of 42 people, you're going to get people that maybe don't necessarily have the same values, and that's completely okay. But our challenge to our group is around saying, well, you know, if you struggle, you know, to have some common ground with player X and player Y, they don't necessarily see eye to eye, find a way that, you know, sit down and find a way, acknowledge that that's the case, and actually sit down and find a way that is effective for you guys to communicate with each other, because there's going to come a time where on the pitch or off it, you're going to have to challenge each other, and you're going to have to be comfortable enough to be able to give or receive that information. And I think that's really, really important. It's just about, you know, in particular in a high performance environment, a high pressure environment, you have to be able to say what you need to say in a constructive and clear way, without offending people and without making it personal. And I think that's really important. And we don't always get it right. You know, for me, I had an example last year where, you know, one of the things we talk about at the club is make sure you say it at the right, you know, in the right way at the right time, in the right place. So, for example, if you've not been selected to play on a Sunday and you've been told on a Saturday, coming and asking why you're not playing on that Saturday is probably not the right time or the right place to be coming and asking that question of the staff. A, because we're preparing for the game, and B, you're going to be very emotional. You know, I'd naturally expect you to be quite annoyed that you're not playing, because if you're not annoyed, then that's probably a problem. But you probably need to go away and, you know, really reflect on some of the reasons why you haven't been selected, and we're happy to have that conversation on Monday after the game. You know, for me, I've learnt the hard way where, you know, players come knocking on the door on the Saturday and I'm like, okay, we'll come in and we'll have a conversation. It's gone terribly. So, and I think that's because, you know, it's not the right place or the right time. And it's those things where you need to sort of think about, okay, well, how can we all be really clear and calm about what we're trying to do? You know, and as leaders, as staff in our, you know, kind of environment, we have to make sure that if it's not the right place or the right time, that we say that in a nice and respectful way and say, look, happy to have this conversation or this discussion, but, you know, I don't really think now is the right time to do that. Happy to speak to you on Monday at 9 o'clock, come and see me then. So again, it's about role modelling those things, because essentially if you're going to get a player that can get quite hot under the collar on the pitch and they've had words with another player, they need to be able to feel comfortable to say, actually, I want to talk to you about this, but not now. Can we maybe have a chat at lunch, or can we have a chat? And that's completely okay. But what we don't want is to ignore it and pretend that, you know, whatever the thing that needs to be discussed isn't there. So open, honest, you know, again, role model that behaviour, try and stay calm no matter what's going on. And if you get it wrong, acknowledge that you've got it wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with holding your hand up and saying, oh, do you know what, I probably shouldn't have had that discussion with you there. I'm really, really sorry about that. You know, wasn't the right place or the right time. And players respect that, because they see that you're learning as you go as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tanya. Yeah, I mean, the question didn't say about communication from necessarily just from coach to player. So some good examples of player to player as well there. So thank you. Dan, final question before we see what some of our audience are interested to ask. But you're actually coaching at the moment in talent development, but you've also coached in the international context and obviously at the senior first team level as well. And I'm interested, you know, in your experience there, what some of the differences or similarities between the cultures, environments at clubs compared to international contexts?
I think the biggest one is probably time. You know, in international football, you can obviously go sort of 3 months without a game, and you know your season obviously beforehand, and you know, right, it's in this next 12 months we've got August, October, you know, November, February, May, for example. So you can obviously plan your 12 months, probably, you know, to the letter. You know, in a 1-2 week block with your staff, where you literally know for the next 12 months, all your targets are for each camp, what you're trying to achieve, what your type of squad you're going to be selecting, injury permitting, and you can map everything out. And the big thing at the English FA, which I thought was a big reason for the success a few summers ago, was the incredible planning that was expected of the staff from Dan Ashworth. It was something which was very new to me in terms of the level of detail, and basically just which allowed you then, when you were in a tournament mode, just to execute the plan. And literally everybody knew from the minute they woke up to the minute they went to bed for 10, 12, 14 days what was happening and what you were doing. And it was a big shift for me, I must admit. And it was a good process for me, because I like to think that I'm quite intuitive and creative in my coaching, and like to do things a bit sort of in the moment. And you're having to adapt. You're having to keep that skill set, but also adapt and work in a way where, right, okay, when we're in Florida in November the 15th, what is it? What's the video analysis going to be? What am I going to need of the analyst? And you're telling him 3 months before you're actually doing it. So you're really having to sort of forward think and forward plan. But the massive benefits of that is, you know, you save so much energy, you know, because when you are away and you have travelled and you're obviously working with players who you don't see on a regular basis, you want to be connecting with them as well as obviously preparing them to play against Brazils and Portugals and Hollands of this world. You know, the last thing you want to be doing is sitting down thinking, what we're going to be shown at 7 o'clock tonight. You know, you just want it all mapped out. And also the staff want that as well. The staff want to know, you know, every staff member is different, you know, and you've got to understand your staff, you know, who are the ones who just, they're not, whatever the plan is, they just want to know what it is. And they want to know what's expected of them when it's quite military. Whereas you've got your other members of staff who sort of find that quite hard, and you're then having to educate them and guide them in terms of getting things done and why they're getting things done without them losing their individuality. So you've got to definitely understand the skill sets of people. So international football is that really. It is literally it's an endurance test really, you know, because you've got very tight turnarounds between games and you know, you've got to get ready to go again, win, lose or draw, and you know, you've got to be committed to the plan really. It's very easy to when you're tired for your methodology to go completely wayward and your thinking to become inconsistent and your mood, because tiredness does creep in. So how do you keep your energy levels fresh? And you know, how do you keep motivation levels high? It's those kinds of things really, I think, with international football, and more so at the youth level, because with England, I guess we were expected to we were changing. If I look back to that period, we were changing a culture, a way of playing. It wasn't like it is today. It's very easy to sort of forget what it was like in the past, and it's not being critical of the people that worked there before I did. It was just a slightly different way, and I guess one of my roles when I went in was to try and bring more of a freedom to how the players played and get them to express themselves more and believe that we could dominate possession against these different, you know, these big nations, and not accept that, oh, we're not going to have the ball today because we're playing Portugal. No, we can have the ball and we can dominate the ball, but how are we going to do that? So, you know, you were doing that. You were obviously trying to identify players, you know, who you thought could play for England in the future, as well as the ones who were the best ones at the time, but, you know, the best ones at the time for the right reasons. And also, you know, you're trying to maintain good relationships with the clubs. You want the players to obviously maximise the experience, but you also want them to go back to their clubs fit and healthy. So, and you want to win as well. You know, let's not get away from that. And, you know, you want to win, but you want to do it in a certain way, because what winning obviously does, or getting to the latter stages, should I say, of tournaments, it gives the players and staff that experience of quarters, semis and finals and penalty shootouts, which, you know, you don't want the first time of them experiencing that to be with Gareth Southgate. You want them to know what that feels like right the way through. With first team, complete opposite. You know, I remember a period, I think we had 5 games in 19 days or something like that, and 2 of those were an Oldham away on a Tuesday night on the most frozen pitch you'll ever see, and then Rochdale away on a Wednesday night, and, you know, again, tight ground, and you know, it's you know, they're fixtures which are the complete opposite to going to America in the middle of November, playing against Brazil in 35 degrees heat. You know, and, you know, you couldn't get 2 more extremes, and both great experiences. And yeah, I think again with first team level, I'd say it's the you know, results is everything. You know, I remember we played Portsmouth in my first home league game, and, you know, just changed the system to 3 diamond 3, and we had lovely patterns and we created chances, and we're 1-0 up, it should be probably 4. And, you know, concede from a set piece, 85th minute, I think it was, and then the winning goal in the 94th minute. And, you know, you get a few, oh, well, we played for 24 hours, but it's soon forgotten. Whereas obviously in youth football, you probably hang on to that performance, and it's a different mindset and a different outcome you're looking for, really. You know, you want to win, but you know that if you're doing things in the right way, the wins will come. At first team level, you know, you have to get those wins. So that's the things that you don't get in the manual is, you know, doing the press conference 5 minutes afterwards, and then, you know, what's put on social media and local papers, and, you know, nothing really prepares you for that. You've just got to have a thick skin, and, you know, you've got to try and sort of shut the noise out and believe in yourself, really, and what you're doing. And, you know, it's you know, very, very different. You know, you've got to go in on the Monday, and, you know, you've got to be bright and positive, and like Tanya said before, probably the hardest thing I found was leaving players out, because it wasn't something I was used to at youth level. Obviously, everybody plays, everybody's happy, everybody's your mate, and then all of a sudden, you know, you've got a room with 25 people, and every week you can upset 10 of them. You know, if 1 or 2 are injured, you know, that leaves another 10 who they all want to play. And no matter, you know, I'd always make sure that I'd let them know if I was leaving them out, and as much as they respect you for that, because from what they told me, a lot of managers don't do that. They just put the team up, and you got to deal with it. Me being me, I would confront it and tell them and explain why. And even harder on the match day when you're leaving 2 off the bench completely, you know, and letting them know on the team walk and things like that. Again, as much as they respect you for it, you know, they don't agree with it. They all think they should play. They all want to play, and, you know, and that's too right. So, so again, from that point of view, you know, there are, that's probably it is the job. It is people's mortgages. You know, it is, you know, from I think probably the hardest but the best thing that probably has happened to me is losing my job, because it hardens you. It's definitely helped me to understand other people in the industry who have lost their job, and why they are how they are, the ruthlessness of them, and the determination and the focus. And I guess that's probably a benefit that I've got now going back into youth development, that I have seen the other side. And what these players are going into is, you know, livelihoods are at stake. You know, so I look at, you know, attacking players slightly differently now. As much as I want them to have flair and excite and entertain and be that player that young children aspire to be like, if that doesn't come with responsibility, within 10 seconds the opposition could have a corner, you know. And at first team level, the manager's on the sideline, you know, having a heart attack, because, you know, that he's 5 seconds away from losing the game, or, you know, he's 6 games away from losing his job. And as well as, again, it will get some text messages afterwards, and everyone will say, oh, you were really good to me. He's the one who's at home now on the Monday morning watching Lorraine at 9:30, you know. And as much as I like Lorraine, I don't really want to watch it every morning, you know. So, you know, you laugh, you know, we laugh about it now, but when people are in those situations, you know, it's you know, we are in an industry which is very hard. You know, we love it, you know, we love the game, but it's really hard. So first team level, international football, they're all really tough. You know, respect anybody who does either. So you know, the key for me is going back to it. You know, and one thing that I've been able to do over time is build my own game model, my own methodology. I think once you've got that and you know what you're about, what you believe in, who you are, how you work on game day -4, 3, 2, 1, whatever it is, how you analyze opponents, player profiles, the lot, then I think everything becomes a lot easier. And if I was to give any advice to any people listening in, is invest time in that. You know, build your own database of clips, build your own library of different formations and movement patterns and how you work with different players, because when you're in it, whether it's international or first team, you haven't got time to sit there for 10 hours thinking it through, even though, like I said, at international level, you've got that planning process. When you're in the heat of the battle, you've got to be able to execute and be fresh and maintain your energy levels, more importantly as well, and for your family as well. So it's all good fun. I don't want to put a negative spin on it. You know, it's just the realities of it. You know, it's probably my time at MK Dons in the academy, when you pulled out that lovely quote at the start, was when the job for me was a nice hobby, and I thought, gosh, I'm getting paid for just having a laugh here and playing on different size pitches and proving everybody wrong here. But then sort of, you know, as you go through it, you know, and if you want, the higher you want to go in this industry, definitely, you know, the more robust you need to be and the more agile, I'd say.
Thank you, Dan. That's fascinating and very honest. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, I've been hogging the questions at the moment. I haven't been looking in the chat. I'm hoping there are some questions in there. And John, have we got maybe two questions in there that we can ask?
Yeah, there's some fantastic stuff in there, Gareth. If I could just start off with maybe asking one to Tanya and then another one to Dan, that would be great. First question for Tanya. Are standards more at risk of being lost when winning becomes a habit, especially in an elite environment? And that question was from Gaetano Serna.
Yeah, I guess possibly. I think it's about making sure that you're really clear about, you know, what your culture is and what those behaviours are. I think for me, your culture, and I always interchange the word culture with behaviours. That's just my preference. So, you know, when I talk about a culture of excellence, it's behaviours of excellence. Now, that's very, very different to what our team goals are, or our process points, or how we look to, you know, how we define success, I guess, as a team. So the behaviours are part of it, but actually what we're going after in terms of, as Dan was talking about there, you know, what is your kind of game model? What are you looking for in terms of how are you measuring your team success? That's very, very different. So, you know, for me, it's really important to separate those out. I'm probably in the opposite pocket, really. So, you know, we have probably the lowest. Well, we have the lowest budget in our league by a very long way. We don't win a lot of games, you know, but that doesn't change what our team goals are. It doesn't change how we measure success, and it certainly doesn't change what behaviours are acceptable within our culture. So flipping that around, I'd like to think that if you've got really clear, defined behaviours that make up your culture, and that's part of kind of your team or your club and what you hold true, that shouldn't change no matter whether you're winning or losing. And so it's really important to separate those out, and that can be difficult. It can be really, really difficult. But again, it comes back to really making sure they're clear, defined and measurable behaviours that don't change. And Dan made a great point earlier about, you know, the change room. So, you know, we talk about leaving things in a better place than when we found them, and whether you get beat 11-1 on TV against Arsenal, which happened this year, or, you know, you win 1-0 away to Birmingham, that change room is clean. There's no excuse for it, because that's a behaviour, that's a measurable behaviour. It's respect for the opposition, you know, and it's measurable. So it's I've never been in a team where it's winning is always happening, and so I can't talk from that end, but I can certainly talk from the other end. And our behaviours within our culture, I would expect not to waver depending on the result.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Tanya. That's great. Another question for Dan, if possible. This question comes in from Stuart Monet. As we're rarely able to start a club from scratch, any advice on how to change a club culture? Things like managing up, generating buy-in to your new ideas.
Yeah, I think it always starts with understanding, doing your homework really on the club and your research. And I think looking for the good first, because I think if you go in and try and smash it all to pieces, that can work against you. So I think it's about having as many conversations as you can first with the right people, doing your research, and what I tend to do is create like a SWOT analysis before I go in. So I've got a really clear idea on what the strengths and weaknesses are there, and what the opportunities and threats are, and then off the back of that, prioritize really, and again not try to affect everything in one go, and try and connect with the people, get the right people on side, and then, as Tanya said before, it's about being inclusive and taking people on the journey with you. That saying around, if you want to go, if you want to go fast, if you want to go fast or if you want to go far, that saying resonates in me, because you can do things very quickly, but you won't go as far as you maybe could have. So for me, without knowing the context of the person who's asked the question, it's doing your homework, looking for the good, and then wherever you think you want to take it, it's, can you find a way of, one, involving people in that process? So it might be that you set the vision. There's no other way around it. In an ideal world, you'd all set the vision together. But sometimes, the role of the leader is to go, right, this is where we're going. And your job is literally, again, going back to what I said before, particularly when your job's on the line, and as much as you want to involve everybody and everything like that, that the reality is you might not have the time for all that, and you've just got to go, right, I've been brought in to put a vision in place here. This is my job. So you put the vision in place, so you can still involve everybody in that, because you're then asking them then, okay, if this is where we're heading, and I'm going to explain to you why, and if it's aspirational, you'd like to think you get everybody on board, and then you involve people in the how you're going to do that, and you give people responsibility and ownership, and also work to people's strengths as well. Find out what people's strengths are, because you'll be amazed at how they can help you get to where you want to get to a lot quicker, and in a lot more enjoyable and satisfying way. I've made that mistake in the past where I've sort of missed people's strengths by just not asking the right question, and maybe not being aware enough of others. So I think emotional intelligence comes into it, being self-aware of knowing yourself, what are your strengths and weaknesses, and then how can you tap into everybody, so they work to their strengths and something they're passionate about, and it helps you to achieve your goal. And then once you start to achieve your goal, everybody wins. That would be it for me, really. Find a cause. What is this club about? What storytelling is very important, I think. Creating stories, finding something which will bond people together and also motivate people to achieve your goals. So I used to do things with the England boys where little exercises like pick your world 11, and they loved it. But I was doing it for one reason. I knew very few of them would pick an England player, if any. So they're doing it on a flip chart, and then you can evolve it into, right, pick your world 11. If they're in, say, groups of 3, right, pick your world 11, but you've got to pick yourself in the team as well. And it goes on a flip chart. So before you know it, this flip chart's on the wall, and their name is alongside their role models, Messi's and people like that. So it makes them feel good about themselves. And you ask them all right, pick 5 subs, pick a manager, but it's got to be me. I'm only joking. But pick a team name. So you turn it into a bit of fun, but then you go, right, okay, you look at the sheets and say, what do you notice about these sheets? And they might be like, and then eventually they'll get to, there's no England players on any of these sheets, or no English platform players, or might be 1 or 2. And then you turn that into, basically, they're here to, yes, help England win a World Cup, but also to inspire the next generation of players. So when we're doing this exercise in 10 years' time with the under 15, 16, 17s, whatever it is, your name's on there. And, in those groups would have been people like Jadon Sancho's and Phil Foden's and people like that, your Mason Mounts. So it might become reality. We don't know. Only time will tell. But, you find something which can make them, motivate them. And again, if you can do it in a fun way, it's even more powerful. And where they're doing it, I could easily stand up there with a PowerPoint and say, right, look, these are the Ballon d'Or winners the last 30 years. Only Michael Owen's won it from England. I could give them that lecture, but it won't be the same. So it's finding creative ways to hook into them, because I know their motivations are to be the best players in the world. So, but how can I break that down a bit more and really get them and get them to sort of really emotionally connect, and then before you know it, they start to believe. You go to Brazil, you beat Brazil 2-0 and win a tournament abroad, and then all of a sudden they win a World Cup at under 17s and then make a Premier League debut, and before you know it, they start to believe. And the whole thing's about belief. Without belief, I think you're going to struggle. So I think with this gentleman's question, once you've got that, you get people hooked, and then you're only going one way, and that's forward.
That's brilliant, Dan. Thanks for sharing those ideas. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks for picking out those questions as well. Look, I will warn Tanya and Dan that something that we've done over the last few sessions that's worked really well, and I know Tanya's got to leave in about 9 minutes, so I want to warn her, is that we stumbled across where the panelists asked the other panelists a question, and so far all panelists have taken up that opportunity. So I want Tanya and Dan to be thinking of maybe of the question for each other. But before that, Drew, you've got a really difficult job of summing up the last 1 hour, 5 minutes succinctly and clearly. Drew, I'm glad I'm not having your job today, because there's loads here. But Drew, do your best to summarise what's happened so far.
All right. I'll start by saying it's good that you record these, because I'm going to have to go back to work out what's happened from some of it. But I shall start at the end. So I think what Dan said there at the end about doing the SWOT analysis, and understanding the culture you're coming into is probably key. So there's probably good and maybe not so good aspects of any culture at any club. It's probably a good starting point, and then looking at culture as a set of behaviours, but ultimately being an outcome, something that's going to be strived towards, but ultimately needing to be managed, reviewed and lived. And then, as Tanya said, needing to be measurable, attainable and consistent, ideally with that player input and self-policing. And that leading to players and staff being invested rather than just involved was probably one of the lines that really resonated. Culture can't just be words on a page. It's got to be lived and breathed, and that includes by the staff, and that importance of role modelling, and also being held accountable, both staff and players, when somebody's out of sync with the culture that the group's striving towards. But that culture also needs to be constantly reviewed, and staff also needing to be vulnerable enough to accept feedback when maybe they haven't stayed in line with what they were trying to do. And then the other bits, I guess, the differences between what the demands of the sport are in, say, youth and senior space, or I guess also elite and grassroots space, and the impacts that can have upon culture and the ability to remain true to it. But then also, as Tanya said, maybe separating out what culture looks like as opposed to performance sometimes. So we've talked about it here before, but success not necessarily be winning, even in the performance space. If you're at a club that's unlikely to be winning all the games, then that probably can't be the only marker of whether you've been successful. The time it takes to build culture being a big difference between that international and academy football. And the bit that interests me there is that maybe international football is almost closer to, say, grassroots football, which some people will be, from, in terms of not having that amount of time. So if you're in an academy space where you're seeing the players nearly every day, you've probably got more ability to work on that. Whereas if you're seeing them once or twice, it's an interesting space for us, everyone that's not working in that real top echelon to maybe take some of these things around how you develop it outside of the formal environment as well. And then I guess the substantial takeaway for me is that, just like all the other aspects of coaching, there's sort of purposeful development of culture. So just like there's a football vision and philosophy, it'll be a process of plan, prepare, conduct and evaluate to develop real clarity for both the players and the staff. There you go.
Drew, I hope you're going to take a photo of your notes, mate, because I bet you've gone through some ink there. So no, I appreciate, Drew, as always. Excellent summary, thank you.
Always.
So Tanya, and what we do very soon is our behaviours are that we believe that the coaches in the audience have got loads to share and contribute. So we'll be putting them into breakout rooms soon to discuss and talk about their particular cultures and what they've learned from you and Dan and how it resonates with them. But before we do that, because I know Tanya's definitely got to go and I know Dan hasn't got much longer, I've set the challenge of you two asking each other a question. So hopefully one of you is prepared to ask the other one a question, and then the other one might return the favour.
I've got one, Dan, if you're keen.
A nice one.
Of course. It's a very open-ended one, so you can go wherever you like with it.
Thank you.
I guess sort of coach to coach, there's loads of obviously coaches on this call. What would be, reflecting on your career so far, what would be the greatest sort of learning moment for you with regards to culture, whether it's a positive experience or maybe a more negative experience? Is there any one thing that sticks out for you as a really moment?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was very fortunate that at the FA I worked with. They had a people and teams department for a consultancy called Lane 4. So that was a big learning process for me, because I had a mentor, if you like, and that I still tap into that group of people on a regular basis. So I would say that was definitely one of them, because I had that support on a day-to-day basis, basically. And then I went on the ECAS course with the Premier League and came across Brian Ashton. And I remember Brian saying to me, I said to him, Brian, I'm writing my sort of game model and thinking about this, putting that in and doing this and doing that. And he said, get it on one page of A4. And I went, excuse me? And he said, one side of A4. And then he put his on the table. So again, going back to role modeling, he was able to role model that to me in the moment and just say, bang, there's mine. And obviously you know, there's lots and lots of detail beneath this, but the fact that he knew sort of headlines, if you like, and then that impacted on me. So my playing philosophy now, I can summarize in 3 words, and although there's reams and reams of slides of it, I just break it down into attacking, aggressive, adaptable. 3 A's, very simple. I know what it means. I know how it looks in all areas of the pitch, and it covers in possession, out of possession, and formations and tactical flexibility. So that impacted from me on that aspect. And then he said to me, what are you in 1 word? And I was like, oh, blimey, killing me, this guy. And I've gone, you know, I've been called a lot of things. And I went, I'm like this. And he says, Brian Ashton, pioneering. And again, you know, he can back it up. And, you know, so I try to be 3 things whenever on a day-to-day basis, which I've got a critical kind of friend at work who does this for me, one of our psychologists who, you know, he's very helpful to me in terms of the culture aspect. And I've kind of got my own sort of sub-leadership group, if you like, which is the head of SNC and the head of psychology. And we meet before I speak to the wider group, and they make sure I'm on track, and they're very good with big picture stuff. But I say to him, look, I want to be observant, composed, and pioneering. So can you give me examples of when if I've done this today, and examples where maybe I didn't or I could have, and you know, and I think that helps me, because again, you can get sort of lost in yourself a little bit and think you're this, that, and the other. But I think it's getting people around you who you trust, who will be honest with you, who will challenge you, who will help you be better. And I think that's something that I've always done. You know, I've always surrounded myself with people like Chris Ramsey, for example, from my time at Tottenham, and you know, the people that I had around me at the FA. I mean, I even went on to Raymond Verheijen's courses. And if anybody wants to know what tough is, go on one of his courses. But I look back on it and think it's one of the best things I did, you know, because I probably got 7 hours sleep in 7 days going on one of his courses. But what it taught me about was standards and detail and consistency to your methodology and things like that. So I think it's about taking yourself out of your comfort zone as well, and getting yourself around the best, and being prepared to not know a lot, but to gain long term. So short term pain for long term gain, really. Hope that answered your
yeah, that was
question.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, my one to you.
Yeah.
I'd like to know who your key influences have been and why.
Oh, good one. I've got 2 that come to mind. One is non-sporting, and it will sound cliche, but I'll expand on it as to why. So the first one for me is my mum, and the reason why I say that is because you know, our family kind of growing up, she didn't have it great. My brother, who's no longer with us, had special needs. So growing up with him and seeing the way that my mum gave up everything to care for him and put his needs first, and you know, not just his, mine as well, but obviously he had additional needs, and the way that she was always you know, looking for solutions in probably areas where, you know, if there wasn't funding to be able to provide him with programs, but she'd always find a way to make things work. So she was really like glass half full. You know, if there's not a really clear solution, she would go and find one. And so from that perspective, and the way she balanced sort of everything in her life, that for me was something that I never really thought about growing up, because it's just your mum, right? So you don't really think about it. But I think as you get older, you know, and things get tougher, and my brother passed away sort of just over 2 years ago, and the way she dealt with that, you know, he was her life, and she had to really adapt and change, you know, once he left us. And so reflecting on that in the last probably 3 or 4 years, I just think how amazing she is. And a lot of those attributes are what, you know, we talk about in coaches. You know, can you be adaptable? Can you be solution focused? Can you put others before you? Can you, you know, all of those things. So definitely my mum is one. And then Audrey Cooper is probably another one, who is currently working at the FA, but she doesn't have a background in football. You know, I think her background's in volleyball. She's gone to Olympic Games, and she is brilliant. And for me, she really helps me in areas that, you know, I feel are probably not my strength. She'll challenge me in a really constructive way. You know, she talks about, you know, dial up your curiosity and dial down your emotion. So when you're in a pressure situation and you want to stay composed and you want to work your way through things, dial up the curiosity as to what's going on, and then that will help you be able to sort of really see what the barriers are and address them and come up with a solution. So they're probably the two main ones for me at the moment. And I think coaching's quite sort of fluid, isn't it? So at any point in time, you're going to have other people that come in and influence, but they've probably been the two most consistent for me.
Thank you, and sorry about your brother.
No worries, that's fine.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Thank you, Dan. And look, as I said, part of our behaviours and beliefs are that the interactions amongst our audience is really important. We've really enjoyed listening to both of you. But what we want to do now is give people time to talk about it and interact with each other and learn from each other's experiences. So Tanya, I know you need to go now. So thank you very much for your time and your honesty and your insight. I've really enjoyed listening to you. So on behalf of everyone, thank you very much, Tanya. Really appreciate that.
No problem for having me.
Thank you, Tanya. An absolute pleasure. And Dan, you've got a choice, really. I know you haven't got much longer, so you can. I mean, you might have already sneaked off. I can't tell, but you can either sneak off, or you're more than welcome to join one of the breakout rooms with some of the coaches and listen. You've done enough. You know, you've given enough of yourself, but listen to their conversations. If you like, so the choice is yours, Dan. But if you do have to go again, thank you very much for your time. And,
yeah, I think it's probably best that I go, because I'd have to go in a few minutes anyway. So rather than sort of just not finishing what I started, and I did actually wear a shirt for today. So I'm absolutely gutted my camera hasn't worked, because I did make an effort for you guys.
We'll take your word for it, Dan.
I won't believe that I'm wearing a shirt, but I promise you I did.
We'll take your word for it, Dan. Look, Tanya and Dan, thank you very much. You have a great rest of your day, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all.
Thanks, guys.
Good luck.
No problem at all. Thank you. Okay, for the rest of the coaches on here, for those that really appreciate this next bit where you get to chat to each other, please stay and do so. We fully appreciate some people. This has probably been a longer one than normal, so we appreciate some people do have to go, and that's absolutely fine. But for those who are going to remain, again, I say this every time, the breakout rooms are yours. You take them in whatever direction you want. There's a couple of guiding questions there, if you like, which are: how does your coaching and match day environments reflect the culture of your club and team? And how would you want your players to describe the coaching and match day environments?